Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Back after a few weeks. I don't think we've done one, Steve, since the great title win from Madison Keys and Jannik Sinner. Speaking of Jannik Sinner, I know there's going to be plenty of tennis talk in this episode, but unfortunately, and I know you and I love to talk about the tennis stuff, and we will, but unfortunately, this was all the headline yesterday morning in the States when we woke up. The decision with Jannik Sinner now is to serve a 3-month suspension. The dates are from February 9th through May 4th, so he'll miss Indian Wells, Miami, Monte Carlo, and Madrid. He will make it back for Rome. He will not miss a Grand Slam because he'll be back for Roland Garros. And again, just the inconsistency of it all is just what's driving people nuts. And I'll with that said, I'll let you give your thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I feel badly for Sinner, frankly, because I think what people are mixing up in a way is that somehow he ends up catching a lot of flack. Anybody in his shoes would have tried to, first of all, make their case, explain how they never did anything deliberately, which was accepted by both ITIA and WADA. So nobody's disputing that. But at that point, he's just been put, as he said, he's been put through the mill in a way. This has been hanging over his head for a year, which I fully sympathize with. Now, seems like what everybody's questioning now is they think it's too convenient, too easy, because the 3 months come and don't prevent him from playing a Grand Slam event. So I suppose if the negotiations, WADA had wanted to make a stronger case, they could have said, look, we feel, but it would have looked a little petty to me if they said, we think you've got to miss a Grand Slam when the deal was made now. So there's no reason it can't start straight away. But my point being, if Sinner, who was originally only going to lose his points from Indian Wells last year and his prize money, if he, that was the original decision before WADA then came in and appealed that decision. But
didn't they initially want 1 or 2 years, I saw?
Yeah, they wanted between 1 and 2 years, which is a very stiff penalty. And most people, I think, thought that was far too harsh. I certainly did. So my point is that I think most people do feel 3 months is not overly lenient. It's still a significant penalty. I think what everybody's questioning, David, is just the part about not missing a slam. So I guess Sinner might have been better off. It might have been better for him, even if he hadn't have liked it, if WADA had said, we're willing to come way down here. We understand maybe 1 to 2 years is too tough, but we feel like it should be a little longer and that you should pay a slightly larger price. And they kept him out through the French, and he'd had to miss 1 major. To me, I think people might be reacting very differently right now. If this had been a 4-month suspension, he was out of the French, couldn't return until after Roland Garros. And the thought would have been, okay, he was in the semis there last year. This was his chance to add that to his collection, and he'll really regret not being in Paris, as opposed to missing what are still very big tournaments, as you just listed, with Indian Wells and Miami and Monte Carlo and Madrid. And that's a lot of big events. It cuts deeply into the clay court season. He's back for Rome, but that cuts his preparation short for the French. I feel like Sinner is catching more flack than he should. The process is what's wrong.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to take a different angle, and it was kind of like it's not so much that it's Jannik Sinner, it's that the process is so inexact and no one knows what is what end is up. It's very inconsistent. You look at a Simona Halep situation. I mean, Steve, it really ended her career. Yeah, she just recently retired with a knee injury, but I mean, those 2 years, it basically ended her career. And you get people that are not as highly ranked getting severely punished more. And no one seems to have any idea of how it properly works. And that's what all the frustration was that I saw on social media yesterday.
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely legitimate. And I agree on that. I just don't feel Sinner should pay the price. Each of these cases are different, though. The idea that you can put them all in the same bottle, I don't agree, because the circumstances vary from player to player and case to case. But I think that the notion that you have a WADA jumping in way after the fact, after the initial ruling from ITIA was that Sinner would only lose those points in prize money from Indian Wells. We heard about it right before the U.S. Open. And I thought that was going to be the end of it. It wasn't. And then this was going to drag on ridiculously long. The trial, if they hadn't have negotiated with Sinner, if you hadn't had this settlement, this plea bargaining of sorts take place, then it wasn't going to be until April that they had the trial. And then Sinner in his statement made it sound like it might not have been finally decided until late end of the year, which is crazy. Then he would have been dealing with this personally for a year and a half or more. So I just feel like somehow they've got to figure out a way between those two organizations so that if a WADA is going to appeal, for instance, why wouldn't it be at the same time? Why wouldn't they have the information, be reviewing it simultaneously with ITIA, and then make your appeal immediately and speed this thing up and don't have it cover such a long period of time? And
the lack of transparency is the frustration.
But again, the transparency part is tricky because while they're negotiating with Sinner, they did clarify. WADA said this is not unheard of. It's maybe not that common, but they do it frequently enough in different sports in different cases. But while the negotiations are going on, I don't think they're in a position. Either side would want to have it come out. It's very complicated, but somehow tennis has got to demand it of those two. Tennis is trying to police itself, which is fine, and that's a good step, but not when it shouldn't be. The sport shouldn't be left open to this kind of confusion, inconsistency, and just everybody left wondering what's going on here.
Exactly.
Now, in turn, I don't think it's fair that the likes of Stan Wawrinka talking about whether the sport is clean, and Nick Kyrgios popping off again, and I feel like they seem to be coming down on Sinner. Kyrgios is. I don't know whether Stan meant it that way, but I feel like he's taken the brunt of this all because of something that's out of his control. He's just tried to fight this from the beginning because he knew in his mind, as he has said, that he didn't do anything wrong. That it was.
I think with the Kyrgios is pretty clear. He was hammering down on Sinner, but I think if you take all the frustration to the players, I think it's less so much on Sinner as opposed to just more the frustration of the process. And
right, but it's true. But a lot of people seem to think that it's favoritism for a top player.
Right.
It's true that a lower ranked player might not be able to afford all these legal fees, but it's also true I don't know how you resolve that, because it's also true that lower ranked players can't afford coaches to tour with them. There are a lot of opportunities they don't have, the top players do, and the only solution is get your ranking up, keep working hard, and you'll earn that privilege later on in your career. But the bottom line is, I think most people in the sport don't look at it the way Kyrgios does, and they believe that Sinner is a fundamentally honest guy and that he is the victim of his team. And sure, that doesn't mean you get off totally. But to me, 3 months is enough. And I hope that I hope things will just calm down. I hope when he returns, he doesn't go through a lot of, that people just let him move on with his career, and that this is not permanently held over him. Because I think he's just fought it pretty honorably, to tell you the truth. And he's just been waiting. And I think the reason that they had that negotiation was he thought to himself, I can't live with this for another 6 months or more. I want to know where I'm headed here. I think I deserve that much. And obviously WADA felt the same way. That's the positive part, is they were willing to engage in this because they felt like that's something they have done with other athletes in other sports. And I don't know if they've ever done it in tennis before, but they've done it in other sports. So in the end, this was a better way to resolve it than having a trial in April and then waiting for months after that, or however long it was going to take for finally to have a decision come down. Now we have the decision in February. So be it.
All right. Well, I want to move on to some other stuff on the court. And I think we all agree, like, it's just not good for the sport of tennis. This needs to get fixed. It needs to get whatever. The process needs to become more transparent or just better, so everybody knows what's going on. I think that's the main frustration. One other item, Steve, off the court, and then we're going to move to the actual tennis stuff. Elena Rybakina's coach still suspended in the WTA Tour. You saw some of the. You can go and look at some of the allegations. It's not good. We kind of knew, but well, I mean, we kind of had the inclination that things were not good. We got a little bit more color on it with the accusations that came out. For the players' sake, Steve, we all know how good she is, and I don't know, how tight. Obviously, her connection to this individual is very tight. If it wasn't, she would have gotten rid of him a long time ago. But for the players' sake, I hope she can just kind of find happiness and really play to the level of what she's playing with because she is a phenomenal tennis player.
Oh, nobody questions that. And she seems like a really quite a nice, quiet, unassuming person. And she's got herself mixed up in something. You have these conflicts from within because she'd had success with him as a coach, and then all the controversy erupted. And I hope she sorts through it quickly. I hope she also understands the position of the tour, by the way, David. That's also important. She's got to sort of look outside herself and put herself in their shoes and realize, okay, they have a job to do as well.
Well said. All right. Some other news coming out from the U.S. Open, the mixed doubles, Steve. Now, it's interesting to me. I've always thought of the U.S. Open as a 2 week event. Everybody always thinks of it a 2 week event. The last year or two, or they've kind of clarified it as a 3 week event. And that first week's the fan week, and that's where the qualies are. And I love the qualies. I mean, those are some of the best matches, people fighting for their lives out there to get in the main draw. Now you have the players practicing. You can see the top players practicing. And now they're moving the mixed doubles and they're changing the format. It's pretty drastic, Steve. There's going to be 16 teams, 4 game sets, no ad, up until the final. Then they'll do regular scoring with a 10-point breaker at the end. All matches will be played on Ash and Louis Armstrong. I talked, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it when we talk to Delray, which I just got back from. You're going to get some top singles players, Steve, that probably will enter this. And we spoke with Taylor Fritz in the media session, and he said there's a strong possibility that he would play it. He said there's absolutely no way he would play it during the singles event. But because it's the week before and it's short and it seems like a fun event, he said there's a strong case that he'll enter, which is good for the fans. It'll create more interest. But, there's going to be some doubles players, real doubles players that don't play singles that may not make that 16-team field.
Yeah, I wish they could have expanded it to 32 teams at least. That's one thing. Secondly, I wish they weren't doing the 4 game sets. I'm not a fan of that, having watched it in the next gen finals for years now. I find that format disconcerting and too short. I mean, somebody gets a quick service break in the second game, serves their way out to a 3-love lead, and the worst that they can happen to them is they lose 3 games in a row and play a tiebreaker. But I don't like that part of it. However, in terms from the standpoint of playing it the week before, I actually think that makes sense. Because the fans get a chance to see real competition, not just practice, in that so-called third week of the tournament, what's now the opening week. So I think that's very positive. If it brings in the likes of a Taylor Fritz, all the better, and hopefully a few other top players that can use it as a form of practice and get gearing up for the tournament. And that would be great because the mix has gotten short shrift a lot in recent years, and the field, it's not like generations gone by when you had really some spectacular teams in the mixed, great singles players playing the mix, the likes of Billie Jean King and Margaret Court and all of those players. So I feel like some good can come out of it. I hope they'll consider, I'd like to see the USGA consider for next year maybe expanding to 32 teams. And also, I don't see why you can't have best of 3 set matches, no ad, but regular sets, play it out to 6-all and have a tiebreaker. You'll still move the matches along quickly with no ad.
And but Steve, all your suggestions, they're going to try this out. And I know I listened to Stacey, Alistair, and Eric Buderock on Andy's pod. They're doing this. Nothing is set in stone moving forward. They're going to try this format this first year, and they will adjust. So your suggestions may very well come to light in future years.
Yeah, I hope they'll consider that. But in terms of place, because it is a Grand Slam, it's a Grand Slam tournament. So right. It's like, okay, you have a right to change the rules, and nobody says you gotta. It has to be the old-fashioned best of 3, playing it out full scoring. But I feel like I hope they'll look at how it goes this year and then maybe consider some of these things, because yes, it's entertainment. They're looking at it as entertainment, a way to bring the fans into the tournament leading up to the singles, which will start this, on the Sunday.
Right.
But I feel like, for the sake of the players, I don't want to see it become too much Russian roulette. I feel like, as fair as you can keep it, and that's why I'm in favor of the full sets, but with no ad scoring, and which I think has its real merits. So we'll see. I'll be watching with great interest. But look, it's a bold experiment. Let's just see where this goes.
Let's see where this goes. And
Yeah.
I give them credit for trying something different.
Yeah.
They looked at the attendance. They looked at the attendance during the first week, the fan week, right? I have to clarify the first week because everyone thinks the first week of the singles. That fan week, they had a ton of people in attendance. So they did their due diligence. Like you said, let's see how this goes and let's see what adjustments are made going forward. I'm eager to see who enters.
Yeah, so am I. So am I. Absolutely. And I feel like if Taylor's saying that, there may be a few more lurking there that might follow his lead.
Yeah. All right, let's talk some tennis. We'll do a quick catch up because I want to also get into some behind the scenes stuff for the listeners and the viewers of my time in Delray. But before that was the Dallas Open, and Denis Shapovalov had himself a week. I mean, he beat Taylor Fritz, Tommy Paul, and Casper Ruud. Steve, he's good. His results should be more consistent than they have been. I've seen him at several tournaments practicing. He practices 2-3 times a day. It's not for lack of work with him. He's able to beat these players. It just hasn't been as consistent as he'd like.
I look back and I wonder whether some of the early career great results, if only maybe it had happened a bit later. We all expected so much. I saw him beat Rafa in the summer of 17. He's been so good for so long. In 21, he's in the semis of Wimbledon, played a couple of really good sets against Novak before losing in straight. And Djokovic went up to him in the locker room afterwards and told him he was going to win it someday. I mean, we all thought that's where he was headed. He's had injuries, disruptions to his career. But that week that you just mentioned was magnificent. And hopefully it's going to ignite him. He can stay healthy. It was indoors. I think indoor hard is the best thing for him, but he can play on anything. And he's a very gifted shot maker and sometimes can be his own worst enemy with maybe going for too much too soon. But that was not the case in winning that title. So I hope that sets a tone for 2025 for Denis. And we see him where he belongs, which frankly, I don't think he should ever be outside the top 20. Yeah. And maybe he's headed back there and he'll stay there.
I agree with that, Steve. I think he should be within the top 20. The way he plays and his talent, he should always be within the top 20. All right, let's talk Delray a little bit. And this is a 250. I've been going for a long, long time now, and it's always so much fun, especially getting out of the cold where I'm from and going down there. It was 80 degrees and sunny every day. Perfect. And in these 250s, you get to see a lot of young Americans, especially in the qualifying. And one name that people have heard about a lot is Ethan Quinn. He actually lost in the final round of qualifying to another young American, Zach Svita, but he got in as a lucky loser. His first round match was a crazy match, 3 hours and 9 minutes. He won over another young American who played at Stanford for a bit, Tristan Boyer. Ethan almost beat Tommy Paul in Dallas, Steve, indoors.
Right. Right.
You also got to think these guys who played Dallas, especially Ethan, who's now had to qualify in Delray, he loses on Thursday, I think, to Tommy at night. Saturday afternoon, he's not just practicing outside. He's playing a qualifying match outside. Those little things, people don't think about those transitions and how hard that adjustment is. He may have flown in Friday morning, got maybe one good hit outdoors, and then he's playing a live qualifying match the very next day.
Yeah, now maybe
he's
let's
good,
be
Steve.
generous.
He's who you should think of. You should keep an eye on.
Listen, let's be generous. Maybe he got in 2 hits Friday morning and afternoon, but that's a quick turnaround, completely different conditions. And but they understand that. They know what they're dealing with. They know that that's what you have to do at that level at this time in your career is be willing to put up with that kind of fast transition. In time, he won't have to do, things will change later in his career. But for now, that's the way it has to be.
Yeah, he's a person to keep your eye on because he's good. I mean, he's a really good player. So it'll be interesting to see how his career develops. just how it typically works when you have a media credential. They'll do what's called the mix. I think it's called the mix zone. They'll have the winners of matches come out right off the court, and there'll be a little media stand where you can, where you could ask a few questions. And then for the more popular type players, they'll have a separate media session where they'll say 7 o'clock, Taylor Fritz.
Right,
Um,
right.
and then all the members of the media can ask questions. We had that earlier in the week. We had it with Alex Mickelson and then with Taylor. And I posted some snippets on social media. And sorry if I'm drinking. I'm getting over a cold, so my throat fades every once in a while. But I asked a couple of interesting questions, and I put it on social media. But for the people who didn't see it, I asked Alex, and we asked Mary Jo this very same question, but she took it from a commentator perspective. I said, Alex, in the U.S. Open, we had half of the U.S. semis on both the men's and women's side. And then in Australia, we had a bunch of young Americans have a good run. And I asked him, I said, do you feel that fever when your fellow compatriots are doing really well? Do you kind of get caught up on that? Does that help motivate you and feed off the energy? It was an interesting answer to it. It was the opposite of what I thought. He said, no, not really. He said he's so tunnel vision on himself. He doesn't necessarily like to look at what other people are doing because to him, that's like playing the comparison game. And he
Yeah.
didn't like to compare that. I thought it was a mature answer, but it was surprising to me.
Yeah, different outlook. A lot of others would have answered differently about each spurring each other on and using it as sort of incentive and motivation in a positive way. And yeah, you sent me that clip, and I found that response quite interesting too, but very candid, very honest, and you see how his mind works, and that's fine. He's been around a few years. He knows what's best for him. And I thought I was just glad. It was refreshing to me to hear somebody say something that it wasn't designed to please other people. It was just, look, this is how I feel.
Yes. It was a mature answer. It was great. I just was surprising to me. We had Taylor and we asked him two questions. One of them you had suggested that I asked, which I want to talk about Taylor a little bit because he's pretty introverted. He's a quiet kid, but I give him credit. He was very respectful. He answered every single question. And he's quiet. He has his head down a lot, but every single response, Steve, was well thought out. He didn't feel like this was a waste of time, and he just rushed his answers. He was very respectful and gave thought to a lot of questions, to each and every question. And I respected his time and I respected his thoughtfulness on it. We asked him two questions. One was, you said, look, we had such a great year last year. He got to four in the world. What does he need to do to get, to 3, 2, and 1? Or does he think he peaked? Obviously, he doesn't think he's peaked, but he didn't go into great detail on what he feels he needs to improve on. But what he said was, no way has he peaked, and it shows that every single year he has improved. He actually said every aspect of his game, he feels he can still get better. And then it was interesting. He said, in the Novak, Carlos, and Sinner matches, it's quite clear to him and his team what he needs to improve upon. Now, he didn't get specific on what those things were, but he says those matches kind of expose what he needs to get better on, and he says it's clear with him and his team. So he's nowhere near, at least in his opinion, a finished product at all.
No, that what I found interesting, though, in addition to what you said, was he added that it's just those three guys that make him feel that way. Only those three, which shows you how confident he is in himself. And obviously, when you look at the players ranked above him, at this point, Novak is not, because he didn't play that much last year and didn't have his usual results and didn't get credit for winning the Olympics. But the three guys above him are obviously the towering world number one Sinner, and then of course Zverev and Alcaraz,
and he's beaten Zverev big time.
Zverev, yeah, so he can. I can understand why he wouldn't include Zverev in that group. I perfectly understand. But the question now, though, is going to be how well does he fend off some of these other players? This loss that he had here in Delray the other night was a little disturbing, I think, for him. 2 tie breaks to Davidovich Fokina, and he was serving at. He had a 4-3 lead, serving the next 2 points in the first set tie break and lost that. and then was serving at 5-4 in the second set tiebreak and double faulted and lost that. And it's like, those losses, it hasn't been a great start to the year. I mean, Monfils played great against him in Australia. I get it. He's caught guys who've been hot on given days. Having said that, I think he expected better results. Now, he plays a lot. He's always willing to play a lot, maybe more than his coaches would like him to. And so he'll have plenty of opportunities to make amends, but I don't think this was the way he envisioned starting 2025. And I think he'd like to get going, start really posting some better results soon. Because the other guys, the drawback, David, that he didn't talk about, and why would he, is that you get to 4 and suddenly you're also more of a target for lower ranked players, and they love the idea of picking you off. And that's now happened to him a bunch of times in the early stages of 2025. But I'll be interested to see how he handles it going forward, and when he's, because he's so persistent, he's such a good competitor. I do expect him to start playing better quite soon.
The other question that I asked him was, and I was there in 2015 from Kalamazoo, the USTA Boys National Championships. I had a couple kids that I coached there. They obviously didn't get to the latter rounds as the Fritzes, the Tommy Pauls, but I said, hey, we're coming up on 10 years from the 2015 Kalamazoo tournament when Francis won. I think he beat Kozlov in like 5 sets in the final, but Fritz and Paul were right there. I think they may have been 3 and 4. Don't quote me on that, but they were right there. And I said, at that point, could you see the success that not only yourself, but your fellow compatriots have on the Pro Tour? And he said, at that point, we didn't really know what the top professional level was, right? They're 17, 18 years old. He said, if we told them at this age where they would be now, he said they would all take it. That being said, now that they are at this level, I don't think any of them are satisfied, and they still want to go higher. It was an interesting response.
Definitely not. And in his case, he'd be disappointed if the peak of his career was last year, but we don't know yet. I mean, I think it's going to be hard. It's difficult to live up to that. In one sense, you say, okay, I got here, I'm not satisfied, I can do better. But when you look at the guys above, leave Zverev out of the equation, but certainly with Alcaraz and Sinner, and then just sort of throw Novak in there based on ability and what know he can do when he's at his best. And those are not easy solutions. He has a lot of these matches with Novak that go 4 and 6. And, he had a 5-setter once with him in Australia. I mean, I get it. He's played some good matches against these top guys. But then again, he's also taken some thumpings from from Carlos and Sinner. Sinner and Carlos have beaten Taylor soundly a few times. Obviously, we saw what happened in the U.S. Open final against Sinner, and we saw what happened in the year-end championships. And it's not that he played badly, but he was outplayed solidly on both occasions. So I'll be interested to see what he can do, because he said to you that he knows what he's got to work on there. They've let him know what he needs to improve. But the question is, can he do it? And is that, even if he does, is it enough? Because all those 3 guys were all so great that he's got his work cut out for him. Having said that, I like the idea that he's not saying, if I never go anywhere from number 4 in the world, look what I've done. How many people can say they were number 4 in the world? He's not doing that, which is a very good sign.
I agree. I think if you're a fan of American tennis right now, you should be proud these guys. And I mean, I'll say it, it's just a life thing. Like, surround yourself with good people. I mean, Taylor surrounded himself with Paul Annacone and Michael Russell. You're not going to get 2 better people out there than that. And it shows, it reflects off in Taylor. And I was a big fan of him before, and now getting to spend, some one-on-one time with him, I'm even more impressed. He's mature in his responses, and it was really good interaction with him.
He's always been that way. I remember doing a couple of one-on-ones with him going back 5 years and more. I mean, I got a lot of those guys for interviews when they were sort of on their way up. And Taylor was this way always. Yeah. He was mature, and he was expansive, and he was honest. And the interview that the questions that you asked him and Delray reminded me of the younger Taylor. That's how he always was.
All right, let's go some random things here at the near as we wrap this up here. So There's some matchups that are just nightmares, right? I think Yvonne Lendl beat Brad Gilbert a bazillion times. I don't know how many times Brad ever beat Yvonne Lendl. But if I told you someone was 5-0 versus Iga Swiatek, would you say the name Elena Ostapenko? I mean, that is just a crazy result, Steve.
Yeah, and it was another trouncing. I thought this time Iga had some distance from the four previous losses and that she put it behind her. I was convinced that this time she was going to turn it around and win. And she really took it on the chin pretty badly in straight sets there. And the second set, I think, was 6-1. It was 3-1, I believe. And she did not look comfortable out there. And I understand to a degree because Ostapenko, she's so explosive. So if she's having those on days and she's taking the returns and blasting them back at you at 92 miles an hour, and she's it's very unsettling to play her. I get that. But on the other hand, we've seen her lose 11-2 to Coco
Right.
at the U.S. Open. So
Right.
we the two extremes there. And I think Iga is probably thinking, why don't you have one of those days against me? Why do you do it peak against me every single
And
time?
she didn't parlay it into the final. She lost in the final to Amanda Anisimova. I
Right,
mean,
right. Yeah, and Isamova, she's also a big hitter too. That's a matchup thing where she's probably more comfortable playing her. But Iga, I think that was a little jolting because she had played well in Australia, and she's been playing well. And Australia, she was kind of unlucky in a way. She had a match point against Keys in the semis, and Madison deserved that win. But by no means did Swiatek play badly. And it was a very close match. But when you get beaten as badly as she was against Ostapenko, I think that's a little harder to take. She felt like she should have been more in the match. Didn't happen.
result that just finished before we started recording was in Argentina. João Fonseca continues his uh, incline in the tennis world, I guess, for lack of better words. He's going to be a threat in every tournament he plays. But Roland Garros, Steve, he's going to be dangerous on that in that
He beat a
tour.
lot of good players this week. It started with Echeverry and beat Korea, and then he saved a couple of match points in his quarter and beat Jera, the Serbian, in the semis, and finally Cerundolo today. It was a great week. He was already up to 74 in the live rankings prior to this match. So I think this is going to put him, I believe, into the high 60s in the rankings. So you mentioned Roland Garros. By Roland Garros, might be asking a little too much to say he's seeded by then, but I'll be surprised if he's not closing in on his seeding by then with some good results between now and then.
And a seed won't want to see him in the first or second
No,
round, I'll tell
no,
you that
no.
much.
Actually, I kind of hope for the tournament. I think it's better that I'd like to see him get a seeding somewhere in that 28 to 32 range. It's possible.
Well, and there's some good matches this week in Qatar. Novak's back. He's playing Berrettini. It also was announced that Novak and Andy Murray seem to be able to go through. They're going to be working together through Wimbledon. So for people who like seeing them in Australia, they'll have that through at least Wimbledon, which is nice.
But
Popper
also, David, he's playing double. They're playing doubles together. Verdasco
Verdasco.
and Novak are playing doubles, and Verdasco is going to be a hitting partner for him this week. And I suppose he'll offer a little informal coaching of his own too. But yeah, that'll be interesting this week because originally Sinner was supposed to play, and then because of the suspension, now he can't. So the only bad luck was that Carlos and Novak in the same half, but at least unlike Australia, it's not a quarter, it's a semi. And they're on the same half, and there's a lot of good players in that field. It's going to be
Oh, yeah, there's some
fun.
other. Popperin plays Draper.
Yeah.
Hachinov plays Medvedev. Medvedev is struggling a bit, so we'll
He
see.
just lost. Medvedev lost to Medjedovic, the other Serbian. He got killed yesterday, and so he's got to go back and try and protect. He's got a lot of points to protect in that Indian Wells Miami swing, and eventually at Wimbledon. He needs to get going soon. He hasn't won a tournament since Rome, and it's been almost 2 years now since he's won that title of any kind. And this one he looked kind of listless, and he lost his serve 5 times in this match yesterday. I mean, that's crazy for him playing indoors with his serves. I got to believe that the shoulder that everybody keeps talking about, that something is still not right there, because there are times that I don't know if the speeds are that far down, but in prior years, you just did not break him that many times. That serve was really one of the anchors of his game. So he's struggling.
Yeah, I hear you. Hopefully he can rebound sooner rather than later. All right. This was fun. It's what, mid-February. We're getting through the cold months. We're getting the spring soon. Everyone in these cold weather climates, stay warm because it's going to be a brutal week coming up. Anything I missed, Steve?
No, but I'm glad you sound good. For some, I know you've been battling that cold, but you're sounding good. I think you'll be rid of that within days. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks, David. We'll have plenty to talk about in the coming weeks.
I appreciate your time, Steve. This was fun.
Thank you.